Amy Floyd. She's from Dalan, and she's gonna be giving an interesting talk on an interesting subject to interested people. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm Amy. I work for a company called Dalan Animal Health. And we've been working with the honeybee immune system and working towards new methods to treat primarily bacterial pathogens in hives. But this technology can be used in a lot of different ways. So as we know, honeybees struggle from lots of things, but we have a lot of losses from disease specifically, and that causes a decrease in profit for these commercial guys, then less yield, decreased food security. We all know all of that. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that. But we don't have a lot of solutions that are chemical free or don't contaminate the honey as we're using them. So we need newer solutions that are proven, they're safe, they're effective, no chemicals, not GMO, organic, kind of things that you can feel comfortable putting into your hive that aren't going to stop you from harvesting your honey, those kinds of things. So to start, I'm going to walk through how the honeybee system, immune system works, and then I'll walk you through how the vaccination process works, and then I'll talk about why vaccines might be a good option because of those things I just mentioned. So it's going to be a little bit sciencey, but I'm going to try to keep it pretty simple. But I think it's important to kind of understand how these pathways to understand how these vaccines work. So bees have two different kinds of immunity. They have individual immunity, right? They have their cuticle, keeps things out. They groom themselves. They have bacterial symbionts within them. But then there also are a superorganism, right? There's colony level immune things happening. Propolis, they have hygienic behavior, they sterilize their food, they have different tasks. So the hive itself, the bees have a lot of different methods of protecting themselves from stressors, but we didn't really understand what that immune system was within the actual bee, right? They don't have they don't produce antibodies like mammals do. So we're how does their body recognize things and pass it along? So we started with the queen. So this is a super sciencey slide, but so the queen will eat contaminated food. She'll be infected. Then in her chemocell, that's like their blood. It recognizes it. Their fat bodies activate a response to that, and then their body creates defenses against it. It promotes different gene expression for fighting different things. So, but we wanted to look at it one step further to how do things that the queen encounters get passed on to her offspring. So the telogenin is a protein that's really high in abundance in queen ovaries, and it's also an egg yolk protein. So this goes from the queen into the egg yolks of the egg she's laying. And so this is where how things get passed from the queen to her offspring. So this the receptor that's recognizing that there's something that's of danger attaches to the telogenin. And then that telogenin is moves to her ovaries, and then it gets passed on through the egg yolk into the larva. So those larvae are then primed to and can recognize that thing as a threat, essentially. So that's a lot of sciencey stuff. I'm going to keep throwing it at you for a little bit. How do we know that that's how things work? So a bunch of people did some really cool science. And we started with the worker, right? Because queens get fed by workers. So that contaminated food that she's eating comes from the hypopharyngeal glands of a worker. So we wanted to see how things get tracked through the worker in order to get to the queen. So we attached fluorescent markers to bacteria and fed it to workers. and then we dissected it as it went through. So this is the midgut, so they digest it, hanging on their midgut. These pink spots are the bacteria, those fluorescent marked bacteria. So we know they make it there. And then the fat bodies are what feed, what give energy to the hypopharyngeal gland. So we looked at those next to see if they make it there. And again, you can see the pink spots. And then hypopharyngeal glands, the bacteria is present there. So then we did pretty much the same thing with the queen, looked at all those same steps in the queen minus the hypopharyngeal gland. But then we looked at her ovaries, and we used a different sort of markers for this test. So if they're green instead of pink, but you can see that marked bacteria makes it all the way through that whole pathway into the queen's ovaries. So that's kind of how we know how things move through that system, essentially their immune system. So once we understood more about that, then we started working towards developing more methods, how to use that to help with some of these bacterial pathogens, or things that they're stressors that are things that they consume that are kind of hard for us to manage from the outside. And the idea of a vaccine was thought of. It's an oral vaccine. So dead bacteria is placed into the sugar feed. Right now we're using the queen feed. So the sugar candy that goes into queen cages. And so bacteria is added to that at a certain dosage, and then worker bees consume that. It works their way through their whole system, transferred to their glands, and then they feed it to the queen. And then the queen digests it, goes into her fat bodies, into her ovaries, and pass on to her developing eggs. And then you have developing larvae that are now primed. So a lot of these bacterial pathogens, AFB, EFB, infect larvae in the first 3 days. And so if you're just trying to treat with antibiotics, it's really hard to get to prevent it, right? And like Alan was talking about with pest management, it's a lot better to just prevent something than start trying to fight it once you already have it. And so this is this technology is a really good way to do that, to prevent it rather than kind of panicking once you have an outbreak. And so the larvae are protected right when they hatch. So if they come into encounter with it right away, then they're more protected than they would be without it.
What are they protected from?
So right now the vaccine that's currently the most developed is for American foul brood. But this technology can work similarly with European foul brood, chalk brood. Viruses are going to work a little bit different, but they can still be the same kind of concept. We haven't gotten quite that far yet. But AFB is the first one that'll be available. So these are really good. This is a good method because you can protect it against specific diseases, right? Antibiotics, you just kind of put out, and they're going to kill all the good and all the bad bacteria. And so this kind of targets one specific thing rather than a kind of a generic everything. And then there's potential for it to increase defenses against other diseases, and then potentially to increase overall performance. So I'm going to walk through all of these. So in this example, we primed a hive with American foul brood. So we vaccinated that queen, we fed that queen got fed American foul brood dead bacteria. And then we challenged those larvae. We took them, we grafted them, fed them a virulent strain of American foul brood, and then looked at the survival rate. And primed larvae from primed hives survived significantly more than unprimed hives. So that one was specifically for AFB. We had the same thing with an EFB model. And we also did it with chalk brood. Chalk brood was a little bit, this difference is a little bit less, but chalk root's a fungus, so that might need a little bit more tweaking, working on, rather than it being a bacteria. But then we decided to kind of cross challenge them. So this was the EFB results, with primed, these hives were primed with EFB, and then we challenged them with EFB. And we had this, very significant, more survived. But then we tried, challenging EFB primed larvae with AFB. So they weren't specifically primed for that, but we still had, significantly more survive. So there's something about being primed for those bacteria that, just in general, having their immune system sort of kick-started before they hatch, that helps them just kind of fight off things better in general, even if it's not that specific thing they were vaccinated for. And then overall increase in performance. We're doing a lot of studies right now that are kind of backing up a lot of these ideas. A lot of our current pilots and trials and things showed trends in like more honey production, better survival through winter, just things that kind of showed overall stronger hives. And so we have a lot of those things going on right now. They're not, I don't have any magical results to show for those yet. But we did, this was a study done by the USDA in Connecticut, looking at hives that had AFB present, or yards that had AFB present. So these orange ones are clinical cases of AFB. So hives that obviously had AFB, tons of symptoms, gross larvae, dying, dead, had to be burned. But then these blue bars are hives that had subclinical levels. So there weren't symptoms of AFB. You didn't have larvae dying, they didn't smell, nothing. But that when they tested those larvae and tested different various parts of the hive, they found that AFB bacteria in the hive, which means that hive, it's there. And so that hive was just slightly strong enough to not have an outbreak of it. But it's just kind of 45% of those hives had that underlying subclinical level of that bacteria. So if that hive were to be stressed to a point that it couldn't take care of everything anymore, an outbreak could be possible. So these having your larva already primed to fight them could prevent a future outbreak, and even if you just have low levels of it. So yeah, we're pursuing the development of bee vaccines. The first vaccine would be for AFB, like I said, and it's going to be regulated by the USDA Center of Veterinary Biologics. And if it's approved, it'll be the first vaccine for honeybees and for insects in general. So it's exciting, and we're kind of in the later stages of a conditional approval right now, and we spent this last year getting it out into some commercial hives and kind of seeing how it does in those settings. And yeah, I wanted to talk quick because I thought there would be lots of questions. What would the costs be? We haven't gotten that far yet. Right now, the idea is that it would be in vials of 50 doses. And so it might be, for hobbyists, might be something that's more, you buy vaccinated queens from a queen producer, since 50 doses isn't quite usable for most hobbyists. But yeah, we haven't quite got to price yet.
So what doses, who did the doses go to?
The doses go to the queens, so that would be a 50 dose vial would be enough for 50.
So that's why she's saying, you know, it would be for hobbyists, you probably won't pay that much. No, so the reason, did you have another question?
They're in, but what?
Well, no, I was gonna say, so if you listen to what she's saying what you should be hearing all the time. that the secret to healthy bees, right, is, or the fact of dying bees are that they're not healthy. So the secret to the success of beekeeping is gonna rely on healthy bees, and that's exactly what Dalan is doing. Because if anyone has ever had any type of firewood or even chopwood, it's like frustrating. Right, so if you can prevent that, because there's really no prevention. So with this technology, you know, if you have another question to ask your queen breeder, or where you get your queen from, you know. Well, have they been vaccinated? Why? Because hey, this reduces the chance of you losing your house. So I think this is very vital. You know, she's been wants you believe that it's scientific, it is, but for you guys to know this stuff, you know, what to ask is important too.
Alan, what's the difference between the hygienic queen that's really want to know as compared to the vaccinated?
Those are two different things. So can you tell us about the hygienic queens? Yeah.
Hygienic means, it's a reception trait, two different alleles, very difficult to stabilize the population, and very good at protecting infected larvae and removing them. There have been some studies that have shown that the removal of that virus can actually spread some diseases. However, they're just not getting sick. They can spend all that time in labor doing prevention. I do have a question.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Sure.
This is kind of curious, so curiosity here. Putting the bacterial proteins into sugar, do you think this means that they're able to get into fat bodies? Would it be better, or how come you don't put it in like protein patty where it's full of fat and protein? I would think that would be maybe a direct route to do it quicker. I don't know.
You're not wrong. This is just what we've tested so far, and this is what we know works. So, the future of this company is finding even easier ways for this to be, you know, putting into a sugar syrup or a protein patty or something that can just kind of be fed to a clean bank. That's just always being exposed to your cleans. But as of now, this is kind of what's been tested, what we know works. So, feeding vaccinated queen candy to queens via workers is, what I got for you at the moment. But yes, we're totally working on it. We're happy to work with beekeepers on testing those kinds of things that have the ability to do so.
Yes, ma'am. One question I have is you're able to use USDA biologics. You don't have to go to the FDA if it's a drug or animal.
Yeah, so it's been an interesting process because isn't a vaccine for in insects at all yet. And so FDA is more for human or mammal based things. And the Center for Veterinary Biologics, I mean, like, right, bees are technically livestock in the eyes of them, and so we have to do everything kind of in that same form. But you know, we have to have this vaccine tested on mice, even though their immune systems work completely different than insects do. So there have been really weird kind of paths and directions because no one really knows what to do with an insect vaccine yet. But yeah, it goes through the CBD rather than the FDA.
It's interesting because, you know, like antibiotics that used to be
Right.
FDA.
I think because it's technically a vaccine and it's oral,
No.
yeah,
And it's called the USDA.
it's the USDA Center for Veterinary Biology. So it's everyone always says CBD.
Okay, I don't know.
Yeah.
So each disease would have a different vaccine. Is that what I heard?
That's how they'll be developed initially. I'm sure eventually they'll be merged into one and
Okay,
be
that's
able to all be fed at the same time. but we have to test it before we say, here, this works. As they roll out, I'm sure we'll be doing that testing side by side, so they can come out with, you can do one or both or 3 or 4 or wherever we get. But yeah. Right now, there's only one and it's only for ASB.
You vaccinate your queen, is that one and done, or is that she's vaccinated now?
Yeah, so you vaccinate your queen,
You don't have to do it annually in business.
yeah, so it would be, you don't have to re-vaccinate the same queen, but if you when you get a new queen, you would need to vaccinate. Each queen needs to be vaccinated, but she's vaccinated for the entirety of her life. We've tested it, we've checked up to a year. So we know will be continually producing protected larvae up to a year. That model is sort of based on how commercial operations work, and they requeen every year anyway. So we didn't look too far past a year. But
Then the second part, if a drone produced by a vaccinated queen, can that drone pass it on to a unvaccinated queen during mating?
no, so we're not genetically modifying anything. It's just exposure. So it's like if a mother is vaccinated for like the flu, when she feeds her breast milk to her baby, that baby is now protected. Same kind of concept, but it's still it's not genetically modifying anything. So you can't. I've been asked a lot if you could graft from a vaccinated queen to produce vaccinated queens. And that larva of that queen would be protected as she's developing, would be protected, but she would then not produce vaccinated or protected queens. So
Well, this could be really big. I think about vaccinated animals and.
sure.
And then allergies in humans, and so how does that affect the honey?
It
that we're
doesn't.
eating?
It doesn't.
Not
It's
at
not. It doesn't. There's no like residues. It's not being passed along to anything except directly into the larva. So there's no remnants of it in the hive or anything. So it wouldn't affect the honey at all. Well, if there's no more questions, that's all I have.
So, I got one quick question before we go to lunch. Right, we're gonna try to ask one of our, queen rearing gurus in the back. No, don't you guys answer it. Don't you guys, let me ask you guys this. This is one of those old questions that you get. So. A queen. Has a drone. Right? So that means the drone has a mother. Who's that drone's father? Who's that drone's father?
When the drones are 100% related to the queen.
Exactly. They have no father, but they have a grandfather. So a queen, a drone does not have, because the drone is 100% the makeup of the queen. Right? Because it's an unfertilized egg. So it's 100% makeup of the queen. Right? But you still need a drone to mate with a queen in order to get bees, because the bees are fertile. Right? So the father of that drone is the grandfather. Well, no, so it's just a great question. But think about it, right? Think about the biology of the drones and the queen, and this whole thing. This topic was fascinating when I heard it. And I think as the technology is developed, it's proven and it's put into play, you know, it should see some benefit. But I tell you, the key to all of this is just staying abreast of what's going on. Like just staying abreast, and the best way to do it is what we're doing here, having you know, like these guys in the back of the room, man, they just doing me right. when you're talking about queens, I won't even say nothing about queens. On it. So that's why I talk about the drones. But anyway, you guys have lunch. You guys have lunch. Thank you so much, Amy.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hey, Amy, what's the timeline on conditional approval? Because I
Early
know that can
2023.
change.
I know, well, it's totally in the hands of the USDA. We've done our part and I think they're in the like manufacturer part, you know, they have to work their way through the manufacturing process to make sure that all checks out.
That's pretty far along.
So yeah, we're pretty close. They're thinking, early 2023. So in time for spring season, you know, when.
I probably can't afford it.
We have been, it's something that, you know, it could really make a big difference, and I think we're trying to make it available to everyone, you know, obviously we have to balance that cost of
Well, I think they're-
making it and everything, but it is,
Just the initial process. It's gonna bite down as soon as it's done.
right, well, and then invertebrates in general, all of you have that same sort of, immune system pathway that, you know, even. You know, it's all the same, so,
Oh, a lot of our other pollinators are probably by things that are stupid.
right, so, yeah, there's a lot of potential, what's slowing it down is, it's the USDA approval, but we want it to be regulated, we want it to be out there, we want to be trusted. And so we're going through the USDA approval process. You know, there's tons of bee products that are out there. Everyone uses them anyway, but we want to make sure we. Kind of go through the process. So that's kind of what the holdup is, but, so we've been working with quite a few, trees, with an experimental use that's, the same, it's the exact thing that will be in the market, but. In general, because it's not fully approved,
Yeah.
right? So, but we have, we do have an exchange program that we're doing, to let people use the kind of how they, so they're operating.
Yeah, you need big operations. If it's small, you
Right.
really don't know if you're getting
Right, you have to have.
salmonella,
compare
if you're getting some
Right.
viral problems, bacterial.
Well, and we're hoping we can get some more data. We have some stuff that will have been a whole year-long study that will, that we're looking at the survival rates, the production rates, all of those, like how much honey they're producing, those kinds of things. Being vaccinated versus not, because if they're vaccinated and they're not having to fight all of those things, they can put their energy. Yeah, it's a really exciting prospect, but yeah, it should be,
And from that one question, it's, from my point of view, it'd be nice if you just kept a couple of things longer and just check them 2-3 years down the
sure,
road,
sure.
just out of curiosity.
Yeah.
to see.
Yeah, we have lots of, those kinds of things, you know, research and development things, kind of, you know, there's so many, you know, we want to make it easier, than having to keep feeding, so if you can just be feeding your whole queen bank as a queen producer, you know, then that makes it easier for hobbyists to get, you know, because it's not an additional step. But it is. And so, it, you know, we have all those kinds of things.
Yeah,
That's
like a
it's like-
big Pandora's box.
Right, there's.
Good thing.
Yeah, it was,
Expanding into.
yeah. So,
Any questions? Thank you.
yeah,
So
how do you feel?
I don't know, I saw somebody that knew stuff up here.
I wanna stop the-
Corn on the truck.